10,000% masculine. Welcome back. It's the John JC back again for another video. And on today, I wanted to do some reading, and I thought it'd be cool if I did a little reading session for the people out there on the YouTube station and elsewhere who would appreciate an audio version of a physical copy of a book read, and maybe have a little bit of discussion in between the chapters and whatnot. So yes, so the book I was intending to read is called The Spirit of Zen, Teaching Stories on the Way to Enlightenment by Sola Towler. Okay, so let's kind of open this thing up and see what we can start off with, read, get into. Let's see. I got a quote by Alan Watts. If you don't know who Alan Watts is, check him out on YouTube. He does a lot of talking and teaching about Zen and the different things of that spiritual Buddhism, Eastern philosophy. He does a really great work discussing and talking about it. I recommend it. Zen Buddhism is a way and a view of life which does not belong to any of the formal categories of modern Western thought. It is not religion or philosophy or a type of science. It is an example of what is known in India and China as a way of liberation. Okay, next page we have the context. Looks like it's quite a bit of chapters. I don't know if it's chapters or I don't know. Here's the introduction. Zen is probably the most well-known yet misunderstood version of Buddhism in the West. Everyone thinks they know what Zen means, some sort of blank state of being where whatever is happening is fine, or perhaps the word Zen is taken to denote the core meaning of an activity. The Zen of gardening, the Zen of auto repair, the Zen of driving, etc. Yet, as any student of Buddhism can tell you, this is not true Zen. True Zen is much more than this. Most people, even those with a bit of understanding of Zen Buddhism, know little of Chan, the much earlier form of Zen that flourished in China 700 years before Zen became established in Japan. Historically, the foundation of Chan Buddhism in China was laid by a strange and powerful teacher from India known as Bodhidharma, or as he is known in China, Damo. He is said to have arrived in China around the year 500 CE, and his form of Buddhism emphasized meditation over sutra study and devotional practice, the more popular form of Buddhism at the time. Bodhidharma is usually portrayed in statues and paintings in China and Japan as extremely stern, even gruff character. He was a no-nonsense type of teacher who even mouthed off to the emperor. See, okay, there's a little reference point. Bodhidharma's form of Buddhism practice did not exactly catch on during his lifetime, but his disciplines, or what are called the patriarchs, carried his teaching forward within a few hundred years, not long to a sincere Buddhist. Zen or Chan practices flourished all over China and eventually in Korea, Vietnamese, and Japan. Bodhidharma found so few people willing to take up his extreme form of Buddhism that he ended up sitting in a cave for 9 years facing a wall. Whether this meant to be taken literally or symbolic, the fact that he spent a long time there, history does not tell us, but it does tell us what that he was an extremely strong practitioner. At the time, his teachings were considered weird, if not heretical, heretical, as Bill Porter tells us, describing the teachings of Bodhidharma's spiritual heir. Second patriarch, I believe it's Huki, he aroused the anger of other monks who found the Zen teaching of Bodhidharma in the, oh wow, okay, anathema, anathema. I don't know the word. Okay, if not absurd. How could we all be Buddhas? And how could enlightenment be less than a thought away, since everyone knew it took lifetimes to achieve? Today, this form of Buddhism is most well known in the West, though there are many other forms of Buddhism as well, some which, such as Pure Land, actually have many more practitioners. The other form of Buddhism most familiar in the West is Tibetan Buddhism, a mixture of Mahayana, and ancient shamanic practice. Bodhidharma's teaching was much simpler, yet much more challenging. As mentioned, in his Buddhism did not rely upon sutras, but was instead more concerned with the direct mind transmission. Outside of books, words, he taught that accumulation of knowledge is useless and clouds awareness. This is similar to Taoist, teaching emphasizing belly knowledge over the mind or intellectual knowledge. Indeed, Chan Buddhism was heavily influenced by the ancient philosophy and practices of Taoism and emerging as a uniquely Chinese form of Buddhism. China has always been great at melting pot of various religions and nationalities and has been equally adapted at emerging foreign influences in its ever-bubbling pot and coming up with a unique Chinese version. The term Zayden, I believe I'm saying that correct, I'm not sure, Zaden, mean simply to sit. It's similar to the Taoist practice of Zhuang, which is often translated as sitting in oblivion or sitting in forgetting. A commentary on Tao Te Ching, written during the time of the Great Tang Dynasty by Emperor. I'm going to miss. It's like Xizong, something like that. Says Zhu here is associated with non-action and resting of the spirit in immobility, whereas Wang means utter forgetfulness of one's own body. Thus, the expression implies a double forgetting, the forgetting of which the method of meditation and the forgetting of this very method itself. This is a perfect description of Zen meditation practice as well. For many people, the most attractive element of Zen practice are the non-reliant on scripture, the use of humor and paradox in teaching, the being in the present moment attitude, the earthly simplicity of mindful practice in daily life, and the simple yet profound practice of just sitting. This is very similar to the teachings of Chinese Taoism, which had a direct influence on the formation of Zen Chang. After all, Zen Buddhism is quite a different creature than the Mahayana Buddhism that developed in India and the rest of the southern East Asia. It was in its travels and transformation from India to China to Japan that Indian Buddhism became what we know today as Zen. D.T. Zuki states Zen is the product of a Chinese soil from the Indian seed. Another interesting thing that Bodhidharma brought to China was a series of exercises that evolved into what we know today as Wu Shu. wushu, I guess, or martial arts, often mistaking reference to the West as kung fu. It is said that when he arrived at the original Shaolin temple, he noticed that the monks there were very unfit and unhealthy from sitting for long periods study and studying sutras with little to no physical exercise of their health, so they would be less easy praise to martyr, or no, that's not martyr, it's maranding. I'm not sure what that word is. Bandits as a form of self-defense. Today, the name of Shaolin is synonymous with amazing martial artists, and the temple is visited by numerous people from all over the world. Bill Porter quotes a contemporary Zen priest concerning the connection of modern day Zen and Bodhidharma on the first patriarch as follows: external circumstances have changed, but external circumstances are not important. Zen is about cultivating the mind. The mind hasn't changed, and the way we cultivate hasn't changed. When Bodhidharma arrived in China, Buddhism has already been in China for more than 400 years, but people who practiced Buddhism then were concerned with the translation and study of sutra and the attainment of spiritual powers. But Zen isn't something you can see, it's how you see. You can't find it in a book. Zen is in your mind, your Buddha mind. That hasn't changed. When Zen moved to Japan, it was taken up by the samurai class, who layered on it their very strict and often rigid code of conduct and ethics they called Buddhisho or Bushitsu, I don't know, something like that. This form of Zen practice that is most familiar to Westerns today and is most prevalent in Japan. It emphasizes just sitting with little to no or no movement. Practice here's an interesting description of the difference between Japan Zen and Chinese Zen. The difference between the Chinese and the Japan way of meditating tells something about each culture. While the Japan tends to be rigid and quite formal in their meditation style and ceremony, the Chinese often appear more relaxed between periods of sitting meditation. Japan meditators walk slowly in a single circle, sometimes at an excruciatingly slow pace. Chinese, on the other hand, do such walking meditation in a relaxing way, each person walking at their own pace in a wide circular area, swinging their arms and making a good, healthy hike out of it. The ancient Taoist practice of Zhuang sounds much like the practice of Zen today. First, one must sit quietly, get rid of all thoughts, mentally abide in non existence, and take no foothold anywhere. In this way, one is united with the universal principle. This will lead next to an empty mind, i.e., a state of mind in which one is fully detached from the outside, to a mind of peace, i.e., a state of mind which one does not turn towards things anymore. Then, whatever one hears or sees, one will feel as if one has seen or heard nothing. The first the first flowering of Chang in China was followed by a time of religious persecution in the 16th century, because the ruling family favored both Taoism and Confucianism. Buddhist temples were destroyed, and the monks and nuns forced to resume their lay lives. This, unfortunately, was the sort of thing that happened at various times in China's history. Sometimes it would be the Buddhists who were persecuted, and other times it was the Taoists. Various leaders or patriarchs helped Chan Buddhism evolve in China, including the four patriarchs: Dao Hings, who settled on Mount Shifu, Shan Fang, where he said to have founded the first Chan community there with his 500 disciples. He set up a self-sustaining monastic community and instilled as many of the qualities that Zen is known for today, such as the practice of maintaining the inner spirit of meditation regarding what one is doing. This includes formal sitting as well as working on the community's farm qualities that see emphasized in modern Zen practice. Perhaps the most famous of the Chinese patriarchs is Hu Neng, who followed the Tao tradition of wise simpleton, described in the Tao Te Ching as following. Most people have more than they need. I alone possess nothing. Other people are brilliant, while I alone know nothing. Other people are clear, while I alone am muddled. I feel apart from them, like a windy and stormy sea. Chan Buddhist history is full of such colorful characters as Lin Ching, of whom the following story is told. A monk asked, "Where is the true meaning of Buddhism?" The master held up his fly whisk. The monk gave a shout, and the master hit him. Buddhism, these pages are kind of. Buddhism was introduced to Japan as early as 553 BC from Korea. Then much later, Mayon Isaiah is 1143 to 1215, founded what we know today as Zen. He was trained in China, studied in Mount Tin Tai, which is known for its Buddhist masters today. It was there that he said to have achieved enlightenment, or what the Taoists would call attained Tao, and was made official Japan's emissary of the true Dharma of the Buddha. It goes further on to talk about his story. You're gonna sort of take a little break right there. Kind of scroll through here. This is still the introduction. And kind of skipping through here. And to see a story here, it says the case of bad temper. A student came to the master Benki and said that he had an uncontrollable temper, which he felt was obstructing his cultivation practice. What he asked, could he do about it? Okay, said the master Benki. Show it to me. I cannot show it to you right now, answered the student. Well, asked Master Benki, when can you show it to me? It comes on me all of a sudden, said the student. Ah, said the master, then it cannot be a part of you, your true nature. If that were so, you would be able to show it to me in any time. The student went away and meditated on this, and from that day, his temper was gone. It's an interesting story. Just to kind of reflect a little bit on what I've read so far, and also including the story, if you haven't already kind of got the gist of what the Zen way, the Zen origin, that's pretty much what the introduction was talking about, the origins and how it was been interpreted and used throughout the century, and how it's influenced the West, and obviously the East with China and Japan, and how it's sort of transformed over time to create a communities around this art, this form of being, of this energy, I guess you can call it. It's a very interesting thing for me, because I look at those things, that Zen, that way of being, and I can see how it sort of has a place, and I think in our society, and how useful and it would be for us. I'm saying us as people, Americans, people in general, to cultivate that and to really develop it, and see how powerful, how masterful can someone truly be over their own spirit, over their own energy. And that's what I feel the Zen really, that I kind of envision what Zen really does for someone is they give them power over themselves by, I would like to describe it as self awareness through observing one's energy flowing through their body, observing your breathing, observing nature, observing things around you separately from you, observing you. And that to me is, I think, is would have to be, I can say, possibly the ground floor development of this Zen power, this Zen energy. And that's why I feel like there is there's that society, there's people who practice Zen by sitting still and allowing themselves to remain in that stillness and silence. And that to me is very important because you get to see who you are. You get to experience who you are beyond just fleshly, carnally related things. Think about this. If you're sitting still, if you're by yourself, if you're in a silent room, there's still a fiery energy. It's like it's like it's like a fire in a room, and and you cut the lights off, and you lower the temperature, so you make the room colder, and then all of a sudden that fiery energy in the room sort of just is magnified. And that's what we want to do where I feel like the people who in Japan and China who may practice these Zen, and even the Western who practice this who have these practices of sitting and being still and meditating, is they're trying to it's kind of like they're trying to feel that fire. They're trying to magnify that energy, that Zen, I would call it Zen, energy that's in us, that is separate from the flesh, from the physical and all the things of this physical world, and tap into this inner power, this inner fire, I would like to call it, in us, that is constantly burning, is constantly awakening us, that can awaken us to our true self. And once you know who you really are, you can separate yourself. You can make a conscious effort, going back to the story that I read, you can make a conscious effort to separate yourself from these thoughts of anger, these thoughts of sadness, these thoughts of revenge, these thoughts that can corrupt your mind and corrupt your thoughts, and which can lead to you creating your physical behavior. And I believe it all can be accomplished through consciousness, right? And there's a whole another box that I'm opening up by just mentioning the word consciousness, and how effective that really is to bring about a positive reinforcement in our lives. Okay, back to the book. I kind of wanted to break off there, kind of like break things down and give you guys my perspective. Also, just kind of like for those who may not see the deeper connections that could be referenced and understood in the story. All right. So next, I believe this is a story or some type of excerpt. A curious remedy. The old monk has been seriously ill for some time. He was too sick to attend the morning Dharma talk and was too tired to sit in Zaiden. All he did was lie on his mat all day and look up at the ceiling. One of the other monks offered a herbal remedy, but it only made the monk even sicker. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore, and he dragged himself to the abbot's room and knocked feebly at the door. "Come in," said the abbot in a hearty voice. The old monk hobbled in the room and collapsed in the front of the abbot. The abbot said and looked at him without saying anything. Eventually, the old monk said, "Master, I have been so miserably sick. My bowels are in a uproar. I have no energy for anything, and my thoughts have become darker and darker. I took some medicine one of the monk gave me, and it was so poisonous it made me even sicker. Do you have a remedy for me?" The abbot looked at him with compassion in his eyes, but was silent. Suddenly he shouted, "Gold! Pour the medicine on top of your head," and struck him, knocking him over. The old monk pulled himself back up, bowed to the abbot, and walked out the door, feeling stronger than he had felt in some time. Okay, that's the end of the story. Um, hmm. Uh, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna say. I listen. I don't think every story I'm gonna read is going to kind of speak a very obvious thing. But I think is important even if we don't understand it. But to if you don't understand, I guess take some time, meditate on it. I guess, and maybe something will come out of it. I'm basically saying that I don't know what to pull from this story, um, other than the fact that it said, yeah. I'm rereading this story. It says, "Gold, pour the medicine on top of your head," and struck him and knocking him over. I don't know. I mean, it kind of reminds me of this thing where it's like, you know, if your finger hurt, let me step on your toe, and that'll get your mind off of the pain of your finger. That kind of reminds me of that whole phrase. That whole thing reminds me of that. Okay, I'm gonna read one more story, and I'm gonna kind of wrap it up here. A lesson on essential mind. Once the student Chongqing asked his master Dao, "Since I became your student, you have never taught me anything about essential mind." Master Dao said, "Since you became my student, I have never stopped teaching you about essential mind. When have you taught me this, Chongqing?" Dao said, asked Chongqing. Dao said, "When you bring me tea, I receive it from you. When you bring me food, I receive it from you. When you bow to me, I bow to you. When have I not taught you about essential mind?" At this, Chao Zing bowed his head and stood away for some time. Then Dawu said, "Look for it right in front of you. If you think about it too much, you will miss." As soon as he heard these words, Changxing awakened. "How can I uphold this teaching?" asked Changxing. "Live your life in a free way as possible, in according with circumstances. Give yourself over to everyday mind," said Dawu. Then he opened his arms wide and said, "There is nothing sacred to be realized outside of this." Okay, I like this story. It's a pretty decent story. This kind of brings to mind something I practice, something I inculcate in my life and try to teach other people and show other people through my own way of being and doing. Is I think people sometimes get caught up in is feeding certain the we have multiple minds, right? We have this logical mind. We have a mind that's focused on solely on the things of this world, and then we have a mind that's kind of, I would call, maybe it'd be a spiritual mind where it's like I'm focusing on developing myself in a spiritual way, or there's an emotional mind. So there's different minds that focuses on different things, and I think the essential mind is about what I need in this moment. And I think obtaining something you truly need, and sometimes we miss the fact that we actually already possess what we truly need, and what we truly need is in every moment that we have. And if we miss that, focusing on letting the other minds kind of take control, then we sort of miss out on what we're gaining, or what the an essential mind is really presenting to us. And that to me is in the story kind of hints at that, which is something that I practice, which is I try to lead by an example. You know, I think people don't have to ask a lot of questions when they're watching you. They learn more from watching you than from hearing you talk or speak. And I think that even kind of falls back into the whole Zen thing, where it's like Zen is not a phrase. It's not, it's not, they say if you're talking about Zen, you're kind of not, or you kind of missing the mark, I guess. It's like it's not something to be talked about. It's something that couldn't be described. It couldn't, when you try to put limitations on it, then you're missing it, you know. So I feel like the central mind is that mind that is, I would say, is focused, is developed through, is present, but I feel that there's a lot of noise in other minds and on other things, from other things, that kind of takes away from the central mind. And I think that's what I get from this story. Obviously, you may probably get something, could get something different, maybe the same thing. I don't know, but in this, I want to kind of reread this last quote in this story. It says, "Live your life in a as free a way as possible, in according with circumstances. Give yourself over to everyday mind." Right? So I think that's about, that quote kind of makes me think about just being present. Just being present, not allowing yourself to try to restrict yourself, trying to control the moment, trying to make it this and make that and make, it's like allow things to be as free as possible, allow things to be as much of itself as it can be, and you'll discover that it's already where it needs to be. And not become entangled, don't try to untangle it, right? Don't try to untangle the knots of life. Don't try to untangle the things in your mind. Just allow it just to be, and you let go of it, and it just naturally kind of separate, or naturally just sort of untangle itself, is what I feel like is kind of like the story is kind of hinting to me. And allowing yourself to go through the processes of letting go. I mean, I feel like a huge part of life is letting go, and accepting things for what they are. And that's something that, um, that is extremely difficult when you live in a life that you have to plan things every day. How can you just say, oh, I'm going to be free as possible, when you live in a life, in a world where people have schedules, they have dates and things that they have to do, and they have to make goals, and they have things to have to make this way and that have to be this way. And it's like, no, it's already what it needs to be, and all I'm doing is just helping it go through the process of becoming more of what it already is. So with that thought, I'm going to wrap it up right here. Hope you guys enjoy this. Hope you guys may possibly could have learned something, gained something from this story, this excerpt, this book. I'm going to continue to read it. I'm going to, let's see, we have a few more stories here. A Real Miracle. Let's see, a Unusual Exit is another story you have here that I'll be reading in the future. A True Master is another story that we read in the future. So we'll cover those stories, and we'll see if we can digest and kind of like break things down, and see what deeper meanings I might can be able to pull from it. Hopefully you guys enjoy this and appreciate this, and thank you so much.